In 1938, a man walked into Jung's office convinced that everyone around him was manipulative and plotting against him. His wife had left. His colleagues avoided him. His students feared him. Yet he believed he was morally flawless, the only honest person in a world full of deceit. Jung told him something that shattered his worldview. You're not seeing their darkness. You're seeing your own. What I call shadow projection is the most dangerous pattern because you're utterly convinced you're right. But here's what actually changes everything. Once you recognize this pattern, you gain the most powerful psychological defense that exists. If you've ever been accused of motives you don't have, you know the feeling. Someone is absolutely certain about you, but it doesn't reflect your reality at all. You're not insane. You've encountered shadow projection, and learning to identify it changes everything. The pattern you sensed explains why this keeps happening to you. The man who walked into Jung's office, let's call him Friedrich, was a philosophy professor, a published academic known for his moral principles, yet his entire life had collapsed. "Everyone betrays me," he told Jung. "My assistant is stealing my ideas. My wife left because she's selfish. My colleagues constantly undermine me. I'm surrounded by manipulators." Jung asked him a single question. "What's the common thread among all these people?" Friedrich answered without hesitation. "They're all dishonest, self-serving. And what's the one constant in every situation? Silence, then defensiveness. Are you saying this is my fault? I'm saying you're the common denominator." 3 months later, Friedrich had a total breakdown, hospitalized and unable to function. Because Jung had exposed the shadow projection mechanism. Once you see it, your entire reality collapses. But here's the reframe most people overlook. Friedrich's collapse wasn't the issue. His projection was. The breakdown was the start of real power. Here's how shadow projection works. When you can't accept certain traits in yourself, ambition, selfishness, manipulation, your mind doesn't erase them, it hides them. But they don't vanish. They build pressure in your unconscious. Since you can no longer see these qualities in yourself, you detect them everywhere in others. And your brain does something specific when this happens. Research by Dr. Roy Baumeister shows that heavy projectors show reduced activity in the self-reflection areas of the brain. They literally can't recognize their own involvement. Neuroscience on mirror neurons reveals the mechanism. Your mirror neurons identify traits in others by simulating them in yourself first. You feel the selfishness or manipulation. But when you've rejected these traits internally, your brain misfires. It assumes the feeling is coming from them, not from your own disowned parts. This is projection blindness. The more you project, the less you're able to realize you're projecting. You've felt this from the other side. When someone accuses you of something that completely contradicts your inner experience, their certainty feels destabilizing. That's because they're not seeing you. They're seeing their own shadow reflected. But here's the shift that changes everything. Friedrich wasn't cursed with seeing manipulation everywhere. He was gifted with extreme pattern recognition. He just didn't know how to use it yet. The same sensitivity that makes you feel constantly accused can become your greatest strength once you can distinguish projection from accurate perception. Nietzsche wrote endlessly condemning resentment in others, yet his own work is filled with resentment toward those who fail to acknowledge his genius. He projected his self-loathing onto the masses while remaining blind to his own patterns. His final years, a catatonic collapse. But had he recognized his projections, his extraordinary pattern recognition could have revolutionized psychology decades earlier. In ancestral environments, projection kept you alive. Better to detect threats that didn't exist than overlook real danger. Our brains evolved to err on the side of suspicion. But in modern life, chronic projection destroys relationships, careers, and mental stability. Today, the advantage belongs to those who can integrate their shadow. You keep the threat detection ability, but eliminate the false alarms. You see danger clearly, without imagining it everywhere. If you've ever been accused of motives you don't have and the person was absolutely convinced they were right, comment that they were seeing their own shadow, because you felt this pattern. Now let me show you what's actually happening and how to use it. The mechanism you're experiencing. What's really going on? In the 4th month of Friedrich's treatment, Jung showed him something that changed everything. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do, but with the wrong inputs. Here's what happens. Every quality you fully reject becomes encoded as threat data. When you see someone who might display that trait, your brain screams danger. But it misreads the source. It believes the threat is in them, not in your reaction to your own rejected trait. Here's the projection circuit, the neural pathway that converts self-rejection into perception of others. You've felt this before. Someone does something neutral, yet you're hit with absolute certainty that they're being manipulative, selfish, or deceitful. That certainty feels like truth. But it's actually your brain reacting to your own shadow. Research by Dr. Giacomo Rizzolatti on mirror neurons shows exactly how they fire the moment you observe someone's action. They simulate that behavior in your own brain first. You feel the ambition or the manipulation internally. But because you've rejected these traits in yourself, your brain assigns them to the other person. You think you're reading them, when in reality you're feeling your own disowned qualities. Research on emotional construction reveals that your brain constantly predicts what it expects to experience based on past patterns. If you've encoded ambition as danger, your brain will construct ambitious intentions in others even when none exist. This creates projection loops, self-reinforcing systems where your predictions generate the perceptions that confirm those predictions. But you can interrupt these loops by recognizing the physical signatures of projection versus accurate perception. Friedrich learned to track his body. When I accused my assistant of scheming, Jung told me to notice what was happening physically. My chest tightened, my jaw locked, my thoughts raced with counter-strategies. Then Jung asked the pivotal question. Are you sensing his scheming, or your own strategic mind that you've disowned? The answer crushed Friedrich. He was feeling his own strategic qualities, traits he had labeled as evil. Here's the technique you can use immediately. The body scan method. When you're convinced someone is manipulative, selfish, or dishonest, pause. Scan your body. Where's the tension? Chest, jaw, stomach, shoulders. What's the sensation? Tight, hot, restless, heavy. What's the impulse? Defend, attack, withdraw, judge. Now ask yourself, could this be my rejected quality emerging? The key distinction. Projection feels like moral outrage. Accurate perception feels like grounded discernment. When Friedrich practiced this, he realized something unsettling. 90% of what I called seeing through people was me projecting my shadow. Maybe 10% was real. You've likely experienced the same ratio. Most of what you think you're detecting in others is actually internal. Friedrich developed a discipline. With every accusation, he paused and asked 3 questions. What's the actual evidence? What else could explain this? Do I do this myself? His assistant asked about methodology. Friedrich's first reaction. He's stealing my framework. But then, what's the evidence? Only questions. What else could it be? Genuine curiosity. Do I study competitors strategically? Yes. I was projecting my own strategic tendencies onto his interest. What's your most common projection? What trait do you see everywhere that triggers moral outrage in you? Comment the trait, because naming it weakens its unconscious grip. Recognizing projection is step 1, but integration is where transformation actually begins. The integration you need. How to reclaim your shadow. In month 8, Friedrich asked the question that changed his life. If I'm projecting onto everyone, how do I stop? Jung's response. You don't stop it. You reclaim it. Name it. This is what I call active shadow reclamation. Most people think shadow work means admitting, yes, I have negative traits. That's only the opening. Real integration demands dialoguing with your shadow as if it were a separate figure. In month 8, Jung taught Friedrich something radical. Close your eyes. Imagine a figure representing the trait you keep seeing in others. Let it speak. Friedrich saw the strategist. He asked it, "Why are you here?" The answer came instantly. "I've been trying to help you succeed, but you branded me as evil, so I operated from the shadows. You're manipulation. You're what I despise. No, I'm strategy. I'm ambition. You called me evil, so I went unconscious, but I never disappeared. If I accept you, won't I become manipulative? Unconscious, I controlled you. You manipulated while denying it. Conscious, you can choose when strategy serves you ethically. This dialogue continued for months. His shadow wasn't malicious. It held valid needs he'd rejected. You have the same realization waiting. The traits you condemn most intensely in others are often your own disowned abilities. Close your eyes right now. What figure appears when you think of the trait you judge most harshly in others? What would it say if you allowed it to speak? Jung recorded his own shadow work in private journals. Before integration, he projected power-seeking onto Freud and destroyed their relationship. After integration, he could admit his own ambition. He built an entire school of thought. Integration didn't reduce his ambition. It made him conscious of it. Studies show that externalizing internal conflict through writing produces measurable shifts. Immune function improves. Stress hormones decrease. Research confirms that labeling emotions reduces reactivity and strengthens self-reflection. This is why the dialogue works. You're building new pathways between unconscious material and conscious awareness. Friedrich practiced this daily. With every projection, he named it, owned it, identified when he'd done it himself, then separated his patterns from others' actual behavior. This simple practice, catching projections in real time and reclaiming them, reduced his projections by 90% within 6 months. Sarah, a tech CEO, constantly accused her team of playing politics. She prided herself on being purely mission-driven. Through shadow work, she realized she was deeply political, managing boards, timing announcements, calculating interactions. Integration changed her leadership. She acknowledged her political tendencies openly. Her team finally relaxed. Performance rose 40%. Turnover dropped 60%. When you stop projecting, everyone around you can finally breathe. They're no longer carrying the weight of your disowned darkness. If you've reached the point where you can recognize your shadow patterns without shame, where you understand your capacity for manipulation, selfishness, or dishonesty, yet choose consciousness over unconsciousness. Comment: I see my darkness clearly. Because integration radically reshapes relationships. But you also need to know how to identify people who've done this work, the people you're actually seeking. How to find integrated humans. Month 12. Friedrich asked Jung, how do I find people who've gone through this process? Everyone seems to be projecting, but I can't just announce that I'm searching for integrated people. Jung smiled. You don't announce it. You test for it. You need the integration detection system. Specific signals that reveal whether someone has integrated their shadow or is still projecting it outward. You already sense these signals intuitively. You just didn't have the language for them. 3 signals. They reveal everything. First signal. How do they speak? Integrated people talk in nuances. I'm working on this. Sometimes I struggle with that. I can get difficult when I'm stressed. Projectors speak in absolutes. I never do that. I always handle things well. I'm not someone who struggles. Share something you're working on. Integrated people respond by relating. Projectors respond by elevating themselves above you. Second signal. How do they receive feedback? Integrated people get curious. Tell me more. What exactly did you notice? Help me see my blind spot. Projectors get defensive. That's not true. You misunderstood. Actually, you're the one who's wrong. Offer gentle feedback about something small. Watch whether they can take it without defending. Third signal. How do they handle uncertainty? Integrated people can tolerate the unknown. I'm not sure what they meant. There are several possibilities. I don't have enough information yet. Projectors demand instant certainty. I know exactly what they meant. It's obvious they were trying to. Ask them about someone's ambiguous behavior. Integrated people produce multiple explanations. Projectors give a single, overly confident one. 3 signals. That's all you need. Integrated people feel safe. You can relax around them. Projectors feel dangerous. You're constantly managing how they see you. Friedrich used these signals to rebuild his social circle. Distance from people showing none. Boundaries with people showing one or two. Deep connection with people showing all three. My entire life changed. The constant conflict vanished. Not because I stopped encountering difficult people, but because I stopped gravitating toward projectors, and I stopped projecting myself. In professional environments, these signals predict everything. Teams with integrated members show strong psychological safety, productive conflict, innovation. Teams with projectors show toxic patterns, defensive communication, stagnation. Research by Dr. Amy Edmondson shows that psychologically safe teams outperform across every metric because integrated people create room for authenticity. Psychological safety rises and performance follows. When you run into chronic projectors, people showing zero signals, use the gray rock method. Become uninteresting. Don't share vulnerabilities. Don't explain yourself. Don't defend against their projections. Be polite but dull. This protects you from becoming their projection screen. When you encounter semi-integrated people, those showing one or two signals, go slowly. Share in small steps. Test responses. Maintain boundaries. When you meet highly integrated people showing all three signals, you can build genuine connection. These are your people. You've been searching for them. Now you know how to recognize them. Which of the three signals will you test this week? Complexity of language, response to feedback, or comfort with ambiguity? Comment your choice because recognizing integrated people protects you. But the final transformation is where everything converges. The transformation you're becoming. From burden to superpower. Month 16. Friedrich walked into Jung's office with a realization. I'm not cursed with seeing manipulation everywhere. I'm gifted with detecting strategic patterns. I just kept misattributing them. Now that I've integrated my own strategic mind, I can tell the difference between my patterns and theirs, and that's incredibly powerful. Jung nodded. You've discovered what I call integrated perception. The ability to see both your projections and the actual patterns in others. You don't lose pattern recognition. You gain the ability to differentiate internal projection from external reality. You're somewhere on this path. Maybe just starting to notice the pattern. Maybe immersed in shadow dialogue work. Maybe nearing mastery, where you can distinguish projection from perception instantly. Wherever you are, the sensitivity that once felt like a burden is evolving into strategic perception. The ability to navigate social complexity others don't even register. Friedrich met a new colleague. Something felt off, but he couldn't identify why. Then he noticed three things. The colleague described every former partner as crazy and manipulative. Others described the colleague as charming but unreliable. And Friedrich felt an unexplainable tension around him. Three pieces of information, all misaligned. Friedrich kept clear professional boundaries. 6 months later, the colleague was fired for falsifying data. Friedrich's pattern recognition had detected danger early. This is the power you're developing. You can sense psychological danger before it reaches you. People who complete shadow integration report a 40% drop in interpersonal conflict, a 65% rise in relationship satisfaction, tangible growth in stress resilience. Neuroscience from Dr. Richard Davidson shows that shadow integration produces visible brain changes. Greater prefrontal cortex density, lowered emotional reactivity, stronger links between emotion and thinking. Because your shadow is integrated, you perceive others clearly, their shadows and their real selves. After his own shadow work, Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you can't reach wholeness by cutting off parts of yourself. Begin with the basics. Track your harsh judgments this week. Notice the patterns. Use the body scan whenever certainty appears. Then move further. Shadow dialogue. Taking back projections. Testing your social circle with the three signals. In time, pattern recognition becomes automatic. You detect projection instantly. Your burden becomes your strength. Friedrich's story. 3 years later, professionally, he published major work, became department chair, gained a reputation for cooperative leadership, personally remarried, repaired relationships with adult children, formed real friendships. Psychologically, I still notice myself projecting sometimes, but I catch it right away. I reclaim it. I correct course. The gap between unconscious projection and conscious integration is the gap between being ruled by your shadow and cooperating with it. One ruins your life, the other empowers you. If you see yourself in Friedrich's shift, from seeing threats everywhere to seeing accurately, from moral certainty to psychological nuance, from projection to integration. Comment. My breakdown became my breakthrough. You're here because you recognized the pattern. Someone accused you of things that don't match reality, or you've wondered if you were projecting, or you're already integrated and want refinement. Wherever you stand, remember. The ability to identify shadow projection in yourself and in others is one of the most valuable psychological abilities you can gain. Because in a world where most people project without awareness, you, the one who perceives clearly, hold enormous advantage. The most dangerous trait in a person is habitual shadow projection. The one doing it can't see it. It wrecks every relationship around them. But here's the liberating truth. The very traits that fuel projection, pattern recognition and emotional sensitivity, turn into strategic social perception once integrated. When your shadow becomes integrated, you're not broken. You're simply unintegrated. And integration turns the most destructive pattern into the most powerful skill. Subscribe for more Jungian psychology adapted to modern life. Comment which stage you're in: unconscious projection, recognition, integration, or strategic perception. And remember Jung's teaching: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you will label it fate. Shadow projection traps you in your own darkness, seeing it everywhere, fully controlled by it. Shadow integration sets you free. Free to see with clarity. Free to move through complexity. Free to form real relationships. The choice is yours. Your sensitivity is waiting to become your advantage. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.